And secondly, is the water fluoridated? And with that information, we can then, anyone can then know what it is that they need to filter out and can select the right water filters.
What do you think about the fact that a lot of people are very concerned about drinking water from their sinks?
They're right to be concerned. The first thing is, there's so many things here. There's a lot of things in the water that we know are in the water now because there have been national tests, not at every location, but in many, many different locations. And when these tests are done, what we learn is there's a lot of contamination in the water that's not even being tested for or checked for or monitored at the water supply level. So, in my view, it's pretty clear. We know there's pharmaceutical drugs, illegal drugs, hormones, chemicals like fuel additives. Anytime they test for these things in several locations, they're finding a lot in many locations. So I think it's time that people did realize that this is the case and that, in fact, it'll vary day to day, week to week, year to year.
Why do you think our water supply is a dumping ground?
Well, because we have been, both in our homes and in our businesses, been using the earth that way for decades. We can point to, I grew up in the town next to Woburn, where the story, a civil action took place where contamination was in the water. And, there are these highly visible situations that we can point to businesses for, but look under your kitchen sink. It's in many, many households just filled with one after the next toxic chemical.
Right.
We use it, it goes down the drain, it ends up in the water supply. We use toxic chemicals in our gardens, somehow believing that in the long run is going to help us. Although I did organic gardening, for 20 years or so, and just had terrific gardens without doing that, and lots of good, fresh, healthy produce. You use it in your garden, it rains. Some of it, of course, breaks down, but not all of it does, and it ends up in the water.
I'm also talking about the big companies that want to get rid of their own waste. Why the water supply? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
As you say, awareness is growing, and hopefully the tide is turning. But it's certainly reached a point now that we know for a fact we need to be seriously concerned. I mean, the net effect of this is not yet all known, but as the studies show more and more, as you mentioned, you had a guest from the Fluoride Action Network recently.
Yes.
You can go to that site. It's a great source of information. They list one study after the next that shows the risks of fluoride in the water. Now, does that prove it? Maybe not, but when I read 10 studies, every one of them indicating a link, a risk of some health problem.
You don't think that they have enough evidence over the last 50 years to bury fluoride? I do.
I think there's enough.
I think there's plenty of evidence to bury this chemical. Seriously. It's absurd.
There are a few arguments used against it.
Yeah.
There were a couple of cities in America that recently added fluoride. It's that befuddling to me. I really don't understand.
Well, that's a whole other show. But let's get to the radiation water filters that remove radiation from cesium, strontium, and other radioactive contaminants. Let's talk about it because you're the first person I've talked with that filters radiated iodine, cesium, strontium, plutonium, uranium, and other radiated contaminants. Are you sure about the plutonium side?
As I've said, I'm not a chemist. A lot of my role is to
But I mean, these are tested for removing plutonium and uranium from the water. That's profound.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, what I'm saying is that there are chemists working behind me. I'm not a chemist. A lot of what I do is work with them and try to translate it into terms that most of us can understand. But as soon as the situation in Japan happened, I spoke with our manufacturing partner and said, I'm hearing from people who want radiation protection, and it's a pretty new topic for us. And the answer was that actually some is removed, a meaningful amount, by the filters that we've been selling for years. Iodine is, radiated iodine is filtered by carbon, and the KDF will reduce a number of the radiated isotopes. But I said, let's get something that does the job better. And they immediately got to work with the chemists who put together cartridges using those materials that have been proven and in use in industrial settings and such for years into what is the most effective radiation removal filter you can get in a 10-inch cartridge. It combines there's a layer of carbon that starts the filter. These layers are separated by sediment filtration too, but there's the carbon, as I mentioned, takes out radiated iodine. Then there's a layer of a resin, and that resin selects for cesium and strontium. And then there's another mixed bed of two other resins. One works on cationic and the other on anionic isotopes. And that's essentially positively and negatively charged molecules. And it finishes with yet another layer of the granulated activated carbon. And these, one or the other of these 5 filter materials, in addition to the sediment filter, will select for all of the radiation contaminants that we might be finding in the water.
That's fantastic. They came up with that very quickly, didn't they?
They did, and I'm really grateful. It's a lot of our customers have gotten them. One of the same thing holds true. We go back to the same question that we all love to ask. Well, how much radiation will it take out? Well, let's use counts per minute, which is like a Geiger counter thing. The question is, how much radiation is there, and what form does it take? Is it 100 counts per minute and it's all cesium? Is it 100 counts per minute and it's spread over 7 different types of contaminated things? Is it? You don't know. I know we all love to say it takes out 98%, At the low levels, it'll virtually eliminate it. But if it spikes, which is what happens with radiation, unlike some of the other contaminants we're talking about, which it's exposure over time, the way to have more protection is to have more filters. So what some folks are doing is getting a 3 canister kitchen unit, put maybe 1 radiation filter in it, and then take out the other types of contaminations on a daily basis, track what's happening on the radiation levels, and if it's spiking, you can actually just replace cartridges and double or triple the level of protection by using 2 or 3 radiation cartridges.
Sounds involved, but very necessary. How long do the cartridges usually last for different applications? Like a shower filter, you said, will last 1,000 hours?
Almost everything, the manufacturer's recommendation is to swap out the filters once a year.
Once a year.
The radiation cartridge, if its radiation is running higher than normal, the recommendation is, 6 months to a year.
Higher than normal, meaning what would be acceptable for people walking around with cell phones type thing?
There are a lot of sources of radiation. It is normal for us to have radiation
Right.
around us.
Understood.
And that's sort of background radiation. So